Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Facility Design. My name is Stephen Hilborn. And then today, what we're going to be doing is a fairly light lecture and be going through a few things, including what is the design development, the standard flow of either people, product, or customers. We're going to look at some of that designing of the traffic flow, and then we want to get into some of the accessibility. What we won't be doing this particular week, only because I'm at a sustainability conference. I'm leaving Sunday technically, and I won't be back till Thursday or Friday. So we won't be doing an in-class assignment this particular week. I have posted some of this material in the back of this PowerPoint that'll be posted up for you to review, but that will be something that we will look at down the road. So what we looked at last week was a lot of the process of starting a facility design, including what you need to know if your place is a pre-existing location versus if it's a brand new. Now, often when we think about facility design, and by we, I mean yourselves and the industry, it's usually a pre-existing. So we're working within a template that's already been chosen for us. So we don't get to choose the space. We don't typically get to choose the menu, and equipment's already in existence. So what we need to do is innovate and be creative and come up with ways of really just kind of making the space as efficient as possible. Now, I did mention I'm going to this sustainability conference, which is kind of cool. Has to do with just all hospitality. And what I like about it is everyone, when you say sustainability, they often just think of environment. So they say, oh, it's the environment and biodiversity and like saving water and energy and all that. And 100% that makes sense. But it also has a huge component with economics and then also cultural preservation, which I kind of think is equally as important. Economics, specifically in the food and service industry or food and beverage industry, if you're not making money, you don't exist. So that has to come first. Economics must come first. And then once we are strong, once we have a good bottom line, our P&L, our profit and loss statement is solid, then at that point, then we can start making decisions on what are the nice to haves versus the need to haves. So what are the things that we can do that may cost us a small amount of money more, or maybe it'll add a step in one of our more efficient process. But what it will do is have less negative impact on our local economy, on the environment, on our culture preservation tactics, things like that. So what I hope is that when I come back, I do have some really cool things to share as far as the way that industry seems to be going. Because when I think about education, I know for a fact there are 1,000 jobs for you guys, easily. But I think that this sustainability and food and nutrition are going to go hand in hand. And this is going to be a lot of new jobs in the future. And this has nothing to do with the PowerPoint and the lesson for this week. But I do think it's important to understand that is the trend. That's what we're seeing. Yes, it's about operational efficiency. It's about all kinds of stuff. But it's also about looking at the world and saying, hey, we need this to be here 50, 100, 200 years from now. We have to right the ship. We have to balance the way that we take resources, or we just need to be the most efficient with every single scrap of resource that we take from the earth. So it's going to be jobs in the future. It might be what you kind of do. And at the end of the day, I hope to bring some of that stuff for you. Okay, so we looked at last week the steps in the planning prospect. Sorry, I have fungus gnats because I have 17 plants in my office and this one's full of fungus gnats. So if you see me doing this, it's because they're floating in front of my face. Apologies. Okay, so we are going to prepare prospectus, organize our planning team, look at the feasibility study, make a menu analysis. These are all things we spoke about, and then take a look at what kind of architectural features. And they are much different from a place where processes happen, where operations happen, like the kitchen, versus where customers would sit. And then take a look a little bit at the cost of those areas. Now, what we want to do is part of the design development. So there are 6 steps, I believe, to the design development. We're going to look at the first, or 5 steps. We're going to look at the first 2. So when you think about design development, and this was the next step after our feasibility study, our menu analysis, all of those things, we want to take a look at our space. So what is our space allowances? As we said, most of these are pre-existing locations. So really we're working within, for the most part, a pre-existing layout. We may be able to do some adjustments, removal of walls, expansion of spaces, but there's a lot of things that can get in the way, such as HVAC, so heating and venting, plumbing, electrical, all of these things. So often it's best to use the spaces that you have to the most efficiency before you start tearing out walls or adding on extra space. And then we want to prepare a schematic to scale, which is show the space allowances, so exactly where we think everything's going to go. Once you would have done that, and these are the 2 areas that we really can work with. Once we would do that, then we would prepare and submit to an architect, a builder, an owner for approval. They would start the contracts, find acceptable builders, and then inspect all the construction, electrical, plumbing, and finishing. As a food service director, and that's what I'm assuming some of these positions that you'll be finding, we'll have a lot of input on here. At this point, unless you're the owner yourself, you'll have very little. Basically, the architect builder will tell you if this is to code, if this is acceptable, if this is safe, and the owner is going to give you the nod of approval. Do we have the money? So when you determine floor space, and what is a good way of dividing food service activities, this is varied on the customer base and also the style of service. So our menu analysis, the prospectus that we did, that would help you. We have some common industry averages. So when you look at a layout, I like to think about it based on seats, because we make money by seats. We put butts in seats and we make money. So often we talk about cover count in the commercial side of things. Now, for long-term care, I guess you have 120 beds, therefore you kind of maxed out at 120 residents. But I like to look at it the commercial side of things. I always like to drive revenue first before I try to reduce costs. So from a commercial side, if I can increase the amount of seats in my restaurant, in my food service department, without reducing quality of service, without increasing cost too much, then I will be more profitable. So the styles of service, and as you can see here on the left, they vary quite a bit. So school cafeterias, banquet dining, fast service seating, they're all about 10 to 14 square feet per seat. Prison is about 18 square feet per seat. Then you have commercial cafeterias, are about 15, 18. In industrial university cafeterias, 13 to 15. And then hotel clubs, fine dining, wheelchair dining, which is probably where I would consider us more. We have anywhere from 20 to about 24 square foot per seat of dining. Either because a lot of the places that we do work have maybe a higher tier of dining. Some of the retirement homes are they're quite fancy, I'll be honest. And then we also have that AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, basically saying that we have to be able to accommodate all Ontarians with disabilities, and that just requires more room. So in many average food service operations, 65% of the space is used for dining, while 35% is used for the kitchen, storage, warewashing, washrooms, hallways. This is very much dependent on the style of operation. So fine dining restaurants serve less food at a time. Therefore, they require less back of house space, whereas cafeteria, you are a numbers game. You are pumping out as many meals as you can, and you have people that come in. They stay for a relatively short time, but you will serve quite a few more than you would in a fine dining environment. So hospital services, I would say about 33 to 50% of meals are served in the dining areas, the rest in patient rooms. So when you think about a hospital service and you say, okay, I have, 400 beds in this hospital, you can expect probably less than half of those would have the ability to come down and be within a cafeteria service. So from a facility standpoint, for a retirement home, if I have 100 seats, I need 100 seats in a dining room. Long-term care, if I have 100 rooms, maybe I'll take 80 because I know long-term care is a little different. A lot more people eat in their rooms. Hospital, if I have 100, I might be fine with 30 or 40 seat, smaller little dining area. It's really dependent on the style of business. Now, we have a lot of areas in a kitchen, and at this point, I would hope that you generally have an idea of what they feel like, what they look like. We will go through some of them in more detail, but for the most part, there are specific kitchen types and some of the general areas that you would have. So all of these areas that you're looking at right here, receiving, dry storage, refrigeration, preparation, dishwashing, and sanitation, none of these are where the food is cooked for the final time or where heat is applied to the food for the final time. That's often called the hot line or the line. These areas are all more supportive and preparatory, but the hot line takes up maybe 15% of your entire kitchen. The rest of it is what you're looking at right here. So receiving area is where you would accept all of your food coming in from the back. We often say, cafeterias and restaurants are fairly similar, but hospitals have usually more items that they're bringing in or more varied amount of items because of who they're serving. Dry storage, anywhere from 2 square feet to 4.3 square feet per seat in your restaurant. So if you have 100 seats, it's pretty easy math as far as how much room you should be giving this. Refrigeration takes up quite a bit of space. There's the preparation, which is the largest of the space right here. Again, very dependent on what kind of foods you are bringing in. If you're bringing in a lot of food that's already pre-processed, let's say, like a quick service restaurant, you're not taking potatoes, washing, peeling, dicing into fries, blanching, spicing, and then putting back in the fridge. You just have a bag of frozen fries. So your refrigeration space would go up, but your processing or preparation space goes down. You have a dishwashing area, and then, of course, sanitation, which is your mop buckets in your chemical closet rooms and all of your different sinks and things that do exist. So as you can see here on the very bottom, cafeterias take up the least amount of space. Restaurants have significantly more square foot per seat, but not a ton. And then when you look at hospitals, I would call long-term care, retirement home, again, depending on the level of the resident, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so step 2 is the standard flow of food service. So how does food move around? And usually that's kind of how employees move around as well. So we're going to take a look at this. So generally in the back of the house, when you enter into the kitchen, they will have a receiving area and a trash removal area kind of in the same spot. One's just outside the doors, one's inside. Oh my God, this little bug. So what will happen from there when the receiving area, so once everything comes in, it is measured, it's counted, it's ensured that it's the proper item, it's checked for mold or bugs or blah, blah, blah. And then it will go either into the cold or frozen storage, into dry storage, and some may go right up to the main cooking area, depending if you order steaks and they're cut, they're seasoned, they're ready to go, and they just need to go up into the fridges on the cooking line. There you go. Now from there, when it's time to start cooking, when it's time to start making things, so stuff that we've had in the cold and frozen storage will either go into pre-preparation and then to the main cooking area. So let's say we get carrots, they need to be peeled, washed, cut, quartered, whatever it might be. And then they send over to the main cooking area, or things that are completely ready to go can go right over. Same thing with dry storage. They may go into a bakery preparation or again, right into the main cooking area, depending on in what condition they are purchased. And then from there, when we apply heat for the final time, they go out to the serving unit. So the bakery might be baking bread or pastries or cookies or whatever it might be out to the serving unit. Ready to serve desserts, same thing. And then we apply all of our heat for the final time. Then they'll go out to, that's a yellow line, hard to see. They'll go to the guest, the customer, the patient, the resident, whatever you want to call them. Cycles back to the pot and pan and wash and dishwashing and garbage. And then you remove the garbage. And these pots and pans go back into the dishwashing area. Now, when I look at this schematic right here, you almost have to think about this as I want to develop a layout that is the least amount of steps to get to these areas. So they're all kind of connected, but if I'm looking at the receiving area, I want the receiving area closely related space-wise, layout-wise, to my storage, my dry and cold and frozen storage. I want my pre-prep area located close to my storage and located close to my main cooking area. My main cooking area should be as close as it can to the serving unit, to out the doors into the dining room. And my pot and pan and dishwashing should be close to the doors, where the guests or the servers will come back in with all of the dirty dishes, so they're not walking to the back of the kitchen. There's a lot of potential issues with them slipping, falling, crashing, breaking. Rather, they should come in and be relatively close to being able to drop off all of the dirty dishware. And then once this is clean, usually goes back to where it was plated in that main cooking area. So when I just look at this, the idea is that in your mind, you should be able to kind of identify where these spaces would be. Now, the layouts that we're given are all different. Sometimes they're long and narrow, and sometimes they're just more of a square. So the spaces that we're working with will be different looking. But within those spaces, these all more or less remain true. You want to try to keep them close and stop areas of congestion or cross traffic as much as possible. Okay, so next one is we're going to translate a flow diagram into a preliminary floor plan schematic. So what we want to do is that we want to take a look at all of the possible arrangements of the work units, look at traffic aisles, look at transportation routes, and kind of get an idea of what is a minimum requirement. I like to think about, we've all been to it, grocery stores, Walmarts, things like that, Canadian Tires, Costco's, gas station, kind of like the walk-in little stores. They all have a very similar style where they have main transportation routes, aisles that are smaller that may only allow for two people walking beside each other, but their main transportation routes, let's say like a Costco or a Walmart, can maybe have 4 or 5 people walking and passing each other. So there's a lot of different layouts that are out there, but some are tried and true. And if you pay attention while you're out and about in society and commercial operations, you'll see them all the time. Main transportation routes must be a minimum of 5 feet or 60 inches. Aisles between equipment should be, too far, should be 36 inches or at least 48 inches if there are doors or drawers or doors that open, specifically in a kitchen. So what we want to do is start to transfer workflow over to a floor plan and start identifying issues. Now, in this particular one, this is just, they've done kind of a congestion or a natural traffic path within an actual home. So when people come in, where do they often go? And they try to identify spots that are congestion areas. So as you can probably see here, right at that front door, right at that entrance, because there's a bathroom, there's downstairs, there's flex room, and walking into the main space. A little bit with this covered deck because they can come from different areas. Bigger one here going in and around the kitchen and up the stairs, or down the stairs, I should say. And they even do a kitchen work path, which is kind of cool too. So in their smaller, just like a domestic kitchen, they have an idea of people going from sink to stove to fridge to dishwasher and so on and so forth. But it's really important when you do these kind of things, just so you can identify exactly any troublesome traffic paths that may exist. Now, what we would want to do is do one for ourselves. So this right here is a front of house. So this would just be, more or less just how are your servers walking around and moving within the space, as well as how is your customers. So from a very basic idea, the customers would come in here. Now this is fairly strange, this layout. The host desk is a little deeper into the restaurant, but this looks like just waiting space, so that's kind of nice. As you can see, they have this little wall which kind of blocks the viewpoints and the sight lines, which I think is very important. So people that are coming into your restaurant aren't sitting there and like looking at your tables and seeing what you're eating and see if you're leaving soon. It can be just kind of, it's not a nice feel. So they come in there, they have the host desk, they have a little bit of design elements with a mirror and a fountain, and washrooms that are easily accessible from people waiting as well as from the restaurant. So they would come around here, they could go into the bar, have a drink, hang out, or go into their restaurant, and you can kind of see they've already labeled a lot of the major paths. So it seems like the major paths are that they would come up here and walk down, or same thing, come to this restaurant and walk this way. And they would kind of stay away. These are just dividers to kind of break up the dining room feel. And they would kind of stay away from in between here because it's pretty tight once all these chairs are pulled out. But you get a fairly good idea. You may think that this area is not that wide, but because no chairs are being pulled out in that direction, or only slightly, it still leaves that quite open. And from a server's perspective, now we don't have where the kitchen is. Maybe I'm assuming here, so the kitchen is right here. So they would come out, they would run all their food to their tables, they would come back in, and they would also go through here and pick. This is the service pickup area. So if they were to run and drop off a meal, they'd circle around the restaurant, come through here, and maybe pick up a few drinks, run it back. When I look at this, I do see a bit of a congestion-ish area, because if they are picking up, they should never really be walking through this area right here with dirty dishes. That's about it. That's the only area I really see kind of doesn't work. Now here's another one as well. Again, it gives you an idea of all of the kitchen now in this particular aspect, which is quite neat. So a huge issue that I have always found with this particular one. So if you look at the floor plan or the walking around of what a server would have, so let's say they're bringing in dishes. So this is an indoor. So they're bringing in dishes here, which is fine, and they have to run it to the dishwasher, which is here, I'm assuming. This kind of looks like the dishwasher. If it should be right in this corner. If you're walking into where a dishwashing, because you have your hands full, this is an indoor, you can see which way it goes in. So it should be right here. Then they pick up their food, and then there should be an outdoor. So what the issue with this one is that they're going to actually walk out here with their food and walk all the way back this way. They're going to run in people going to and from the washrooms, coming in or out of the office, the bartenders. This is a poorly designed restaurant schematic. This one here is much better. Again, it has that idea where we have in and outdoors, and we're able to kind of move around a little bit more efficiently. And it's just give you another example of some of the ways that people work. So when it comes to universal design, there's a few things that you should understand. This is more guidelines, let's say. So we have very diverse populations, and this includes height, weight, race, culture, ability. So we want to ensure that we have equitable use for all of our diverse populations. Flexibility where we can. So if I were to look back at some of our layouts, the great thing about booths are that they're comfortable, but these are not flexible whatsoever. It's a table of maybe 6 max, and that's it. Can't move, can't add on. Where I look at these 3 tables, where they fit, I can push these all together and make a group of 10. I can make a 4 and a 6, or I can make 3 tables, 2 4s, and a deuce. And has a lot more flexibility as far as what I can do with it. Booths are more comfortable, but they're harder to sit in for people with disabilities, and it's not as booths are more comfortable but not flexible. A simple and intuitive design. Often we try to segment our restaurant layout or our commercial food service layout into separate little areas. Almost, there could be a party room, there could be dining room 1, dining room 2, and we open and close these spaces as business demands. It is easy to see and understand information, so I should understand where the washrooms are, the entrance, the exit. It is the opposite of what casinos do. Casinos literally are built in a layout to confuse you. They have 2 different designs, most casinos, and one is called the playground and one is called the maze, and both of which don't allow you to really know how to get out of there. Tolerance for error, so just minimize hazards as much as possible, and this is usually blind corners where you're walking around, so just the use of mirrors and things like that might be really applicable. Low physical effort. Limit the amount of steps you need to take. I used to count the amount of steps it would take me to run dishes from a table that I would serve to in Casino-rama, all the way to the dish area, and it was 160 steps. And it was 120 to the kitchen. So if someone asked for, hey, can I get a ramekin of ketchup? I was like, sure, no problem. But then I was running to get a ramekin and ketchup, and then I run back. And they say, here you go. Oh, sorry, we also want steak sauce. Okay, no problem, I'll be back. And it was just, I would put in 25,000 steps in an 8-hour shift of serving, not even 8 hours, usually like 6 hours of serving, and I was just exhausted. It's hard on your employees. See, if you can design it better, then you have to. And then size and space, so reasonable amount of space for all areas with all levels of mobility. So when we think about mobility, there's a few things that we have to understand. So when it comes to AODA, which is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the minimum room available for a 360-degree turn in a wheelchair is 96 inches. Minimum room for a 180-degree turn is 54 inches. So it gives you an idea of what 96 inches looks like. Now you would have to have a space somewhere in your area with 96 inches. Although sometimes they say 60 inches is enough, but I'll show you about that. 180-degree turning space, as you can just give you an idea of what they might be doing. So it's basically like a parallel park where they just go in there and they back up. And just gives you an idea. This right here would not be a testable material, but 43 inches is usually what they require as far as space. 43 inches in all their walking areas. So some other ones, so clearances at alcoves, clear floor space, so usually about 48 inches, a parallel approach, and then also clear floor space for scooters. It just gives you some kind of basics that we work with. We will have an assignment where we need to redesign a room that is somewhat crowded, and I'll give you these minimums, and you'll have to go in and kind of readjust and try to keep as many seats as possible, while still accommodating all different diverse populations. So here's another good example. It's just good to understand, it's just good to know that a side reach without obstruction. So if I'm in a wheelchair and I'm trying to reach to my left or my right, it's usually 9 inches off the floor to a maximum of 54 inches high. So if there is something on the floor, I generally can't get it in a wheelchair, not beside me. Side reach over obstruction, it's not as much. So 34 inches off the floor to a max of 46, you can reach about 2 feet in. So if there's a sink, and the sink and the tap and able to turn it on is more than 2 feet away from where that person is located, they won't be able to turn that on. An idea of your forward reach has a maximum reach of about 16 inches off the floor to a max of 47. And generally your eye level. So when you think about this, we often have, might have exit signs and restaurant signs or bathroom signs quite high up, kind of up in the ceiling. But the optimal eye level range for reading and seeing for people with accommodations is between 43 and 51 inches. So it just changes a little bit. And then, oh, too fast. And then we have the forward reach, which is really not that much as well. And then when you look at this right here, it just gives you an idea of how much room they have. So this would be the example of an accessible sink where they are able to roll in underneath it. So this is the forward reach over an obtrusion or obstruction, sorry. Now, here's a little bit more important as far as our design layouts. So when it comes to pathways and travel corridors, there's a lot of information that we have to understand. Now, I like to say 43. All travel pathways should be 43 inches. It's 43 and a quarter, but whatever. So 43 inches as a minimum. Now, you can have smaller areas. So as an example, if you have like a cafeteria and it's 3 or 4 rows of seating, only one of those aisles in between those tables need to be 43, but at least one of them have to be. Cane is 36 to 60 inches. Service dog is 42. Wheelchair and upright walker, so this is them right here. So passing each other is 54. And a side-by-side wheelchair is 72. So you might have in your long-term care one single travel corridor that basically goes from the front of the restaurant to the washrooms and to some of your seating at 72. Again, not all tables need to be AODA. You just have to have some that will have access. So this is just some door stuff. Again, I'm not going to go into this particular stuff way too much. I just think it's valuable information. And there might be a time where we review this or go back to this based on one of the assignments that we're trying to complete. And this final one here is all about ramps and slope. So often what happens is people try to retrofit and create ramps and slopes just because they think they can do it. But there is a regulatory amount. And it's more than what you think. So the ability for someone to pull themselves or wheel themselves up a ramp or up a slope, can have some really detrimental effects, especially in our climate where we have seasons that can be quite slippery and treacherous. So typically it's a 1 in 20 max slope. So basically what that means is that for every foot that you travel, you go up 1 inch. So you may go up 20 inches over a max of 20 feet. So 1 in 20 is your max slope. And then you have 180-degree landing areas where you can turn, and the top of the ramp should be big enough to do a complete turn. So you'll just get an idea of how this works. And should your ramp be too long, you do need a landing for resting, where they might need a rest or a spot to stop for a minute, gather their breath, their energy, whatever it might be, and then continue on. And that is more or less it for week 3. So we went through a lot of the travel flows and the walkway and the corridors and those kind of restrictions. Generally, at the end of the day, what I am looking for you to understand is that there is a method, there is a strategy to where we place all of our areas in all food service. An ineffective design can decrease efficiency, can lower service times, can lower customer counts, and then at the end of the day, lower revenues. There is a reason that only 1 in 5 restaurants make it past 5 years. And there's a reason for that. And it's design and layout and basically standard operating procedures and creating SOPs that are effective and efficient will save you in those low times and the slow times and the pandemics, in those high cost times. These are the things that are going to save you. When revenue is high, it's easy to be successful. But in the late January, early February, when everyone's kind of, they have their end of the year or new year resolutions, they're tight on money, they have bills coming in from the new year or taxes or Christmas or whatever it might be, and restaurant dining is typically one to go first. So it's one of those things that we have to understand, that the way in which we set things up, which we are very much in control of, have a huge impact on the success of our business moving forward. Thank you very much for tuning in. That was 35 minutes. So as this is week 3, there's no assignment for you right now. What I will be doing on week 4, as I mentioned in my announcement, you'll have a video. I'll give you a training video on Canva. And on week 4, we will start our first menu design assignment, as well as looking into menu psychology. So when someone looks at the menu, what does their brain say? Thank you, and have a great day.